Welcome to Common Mansplaining, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Eddie and Christian here. Christian, how's it going?
Excellent.
Sweet. All right. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that I am not nearly as well versed in as Christian is. For those of you guys who don't know us, we're not elites, right? We're not guys that have PhDs in advanced economics degrees or anything like that. While I did do some household finance consulting when I was younger, and I took Econ 101 in college. It's been 25 years since I did that, so my macroeconomics knowledge is limited. And Christian had some business finance training and experience, so he has at least a little bit more exposure than I do. We're going to talk about the American monetary system today a bit and some of the changes that Trump is going to make, which, again, I am not as familiar with, right? And the effects. But we're going to talk about, so that one thing that I want you guys to watch for is how I approach topics that I'm not well versed in, right? Because that's an important thing for the common man to learn is how to learn, right? It's much better than assuming that we know it all just because we Googled something once and we think we have a firm command of it. It's much better to just ask a lot of questions, try to learn, and then the big thing that I want you guys to see here is that this is just the first step on the road to knowledge. This is just me learning what I need to learn, which I will then, of course, take and make notes on and then go research and then try to learn for myself. And then only then will I think I have even a beginner's level of knowledge, So Trump is going to maybe appoint this, I guess, Kevin Warsh as a potential Fed chair. And
well, but before we get to that, I just want to reiterate in your opening statement the importance of educating yourself is so you can see through the narrative. Right. Yes. The prevailing narrative right now, the mainstream media, is that Trump's just destroying everything, that he's not building anything, right? That he has no cogent plan, and it's not a real alternative or a serious alternative. So we're gonna talk about that too. But this will help you understand both narratives and decide for yourself, right? Yeah. Now you might come down, you might disagree with the president's policy, but you won't just take it for what the mainstream media presents it for or caricatures. And I think it's powerful so that you can base your support for the president and for what he's doing on real substance and not on just hating the Biden administration and loving America, which are good things to start with. But this, I think, as an intellectual basis, I think could strengthen your foundation and really win your votes when the votes matter. We have the votes coming up this year, and there's midterms. I think Trump's going to treat them like a presidential election, and for the common man, we should try to treat them just as seriously.
Yeah, and especially, I should say, especially for Trump, like these things that Christian's talking about are especially the case for Trump. With somebody who's more like all the previous presidents are much more like they do normal policies, they stay within the box, they do the stuff that's age old and like in the lane. Trump is wildly new for a lot of things, and economics is definitely one of them. So like with that kind of thing, it's dangerous to use the conventional logic to apply to an unconventional president, right? It's dangerous to like assume that he's going to conform to the exact same rules. And time again, we've seen in the news that the economists are like, well, this didn't go exactly like we were thinking it was going to go. So just keep an open mind. That's it.
Well, so, and that the framing of this and the big narrative that people want you to know is that we've had great growth, 5% growth, and it's been felt in Main Street, normal middle class, working families, 5%. We've had wage growth, and we've seen results of his economic policy start to bear fruit. We have in North Carolina, factories coming back here. John Deere is building a factory in North Carolina. It's going to build excavators. We're going to build excavators in America. Yeah, right. They're bringing it back from Japan because of tariffs and because of as well as other things. So The real impact and the 5% growth. Nobody saw 5% growth with negligible inflation, and so these are the things that are the foundation of a strong economy.
Definitely.
That are not right. And so now we'll talk about. So the big thing in the news has been him appointing a replacement for Jay Powell and Kevin Warsh to be the new Fed chair. So this person, right, there have been pieces back and forth. Some say he's not going to be revolutionary or other things. We'll see. He has a record of being an inflation hawk. He's not somebody who likes to have runaway inflation, which is a conservative, principle. But more than that, as I've learned, as I've studied about the importance of this, is he wants to push the American model, right, which has its basis in Alexander Hamilton model, and versus the British global model. So Alexander Hamilton, all right. So I'll give you a little history on this. Alexander Hamilton, 1791, was the first Secretary of the Treasury, right? The very first one appointed by, and so he put forth a model where, right, at that time we were creating raw materials and sending them to Britain to be manufactured. We were kind of very reliant on that. That we would, through a system of tariffs for goods and subsidies to help get manufacturing going, support American manufacturing, make us an industrial nation, the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, and that the government create a social structure for that and even subsidize industry.
Right.
So by 1804, that was 15 years later, or 13 years later, that was doing very, very well. And he was killed by Ehrenberg. And shortly after that, we had the war with War of 1812 with Great Britain, right? And so one of the big things is in the 18th century, or in the 19th century, Great Britain didn't want other countries to follow the U.S. Did not want not only just declare independence, but then to create economic models of self-sufficiency that didn't tie them back to Great Britain. So it's like, oh yeah, you want to have your own councils, but if you're still tied to us economically, you're still part of our empire, right? And so one of the big proponents of doing this was a man who was foreign minister and then prime minister, dominated British foreign policy in the 19th century. His name was Lord Palmerston. Eddie just educated Eddie on this person, and sort of a lionized figure within the globalist community, as somebody they really look up to. And is quoted for his sort of flexibility, right? That we have no permanent interests, or we have no permanent enemies or allies. We just have our interests that are eternal. And we have a duty to serve those interests. But he, he created this system within the British Empire, and using and came up with a way of sort of destabilizing countries from within, but he was also very militaristic. He would send militaries, but was very interventionist and sort of. But in the 20th century, in the 20th century, that has looked like democracy promotion or other things like that. The playbook that Bush and the neocons followed, right? Trump has essentially said he's not going to follow that. That last month, I think on the 23rd. There was a new defense doctrine put out by Pete Hegseth, essentially saying that we're going to try to confront China with strength and not through conflict, right? Not like our approach to China is different, but we're not going to fight. We're not going to be concerned about promoting democracy around the world or fighting British wars anymore. And we're going to bring things back. This has had huge sort of ramifications, just, the Davos thing of resetting sort of the UN. We kind of think of the UN as a place where people talk and nothing much happens. And Marco Rubio created this like committee for peace, of countries that wanted to do action that's kind of now taking over. Do we have a
yeah, no, I was just looking at, so he says Christian nationalism is not Christianity. Not particularly relevant to our topic, but
okay. All right.
For what it's worth, I agree that they're
nationalism. Sorry. All right. Anyway, so relevant, like our military is not going to fight wars that Britain thinks or the globalists think are important anymore. We do have initiatives. We are concerned with peace in Israel and Palestine. We have these initiatives to put forward and have a large group of people in the Middle East, Saudis, Qatar, Turkey as well, that are committed to working on the thing. So that is a priority. But Ukraine and Russia is not really a priority for America. Right. And that's sort of, very, very scary for, and changing that world order, saying that world order is dead. Now, Trump, one of the big things why this seems chaotic, like you talked about, it was because Trump's 2020 election, right? Because, he lost the 2020 election under rather dubious circumstances. It's becoming more and more suspect. But that interrupted sort of his policy. So what he's had to do largely, it's a counter-revolution to the Biden policies. And a huge part of that is confronting immigration. Yes. Because immigration is a big part of the globalist monetary policy as well. Importing cheap labor, things like that. That's not the American model of the Hamilton. Is we want to have strong industry here that gives us a measure of national defense independence too, right? As well, and that can bring prosperity, can bring wages up for working families. And then we're not going to do bailouts for global elites, for Wall Street bailouts, banks, things like that. We're not going to have a Federal Reserve that is more concerned with what's going on international markets and in other countries than the U.S. They're going to let the Treasury Department take its role in sort of leading monetary policy rather than the Fed leading monetary policy.
Right? Okay. First question.
Sure.
If the Fed is effectively gonna kind of partner up with the Treasury, right, and take direction from the government, which by the way, I personally would say that I don't really like the Fed. I don't think that there's really much of a purpose for them. But if they're gonna do that, like they're gonna be walking hand in hand, why do we even have them?
That's true. Well, yes, it would be ideal to replace them with the United States Bank, right? And have United States bank notes, not Federal Reserve notes. If they can serve a function related to Treasury, I think right now this is an opportunity for them to justify why we should keep them around. Yeah. If they can work with Treasury in harmony and not against the interest of that.
So now one of my questions though is it's a weird kind of tension. So because in my research, one of the things that it says is one of the reasons for the Fed in the first place is because they didn't want to have a highly politicized, organization. They didn't have much trust in the at the time, so they wanted to take it out of the politicians' hands and put it in an independent. But these guys are just as political, so I'm not sure.
Yes, they're open to political manipulation, but even outside the U.S., right? Yeah. Not even U.S. political. Their big role, right? It's going back to the Great Depression, was to help banks, insure banks, so there wouldn't be runs on banks, right? Right. Then we have the FDIC. That's their main function. Is you're not worried that if you've got less than $250,000 deposited in a bank, that you'll be able to get your money. Right. And so that sort of peace of mind and guarantee keeps you from freaking out at any sort of bad news. and going and getting all your money out of the bank, right? Which people used to do on the regular, and then banks would fail, right? Especially savings and loans, right? And then but in doing this, right, banks have to interact with each other because at certain times, like their lending or their capital demands can fluctuate a little bit, and they need loans between themselves. And the Fed created a way for that to happen that was above, not corrupt and made out in the open, kind of things like that. So that and we've had, for the most part, largely stable banking. It's not that banks haven't gone out of business or there hasn't been corruption or banks making bad decisions. But for the most part, American banking has been, especially Main Street banking for the common man, even these credit unions and stuff, has been largely pretty sound.
So, okay, another question I have is, so like again, I'm not much of a globalist, obviously. And we're kind of skeptical of the global elites here on common. But that being said, we live in a different world than we did when Hamilton was around, right? Like we live in a world that there's two major differences. I mean, there's many major differences, but there's two major differences that come to mind. One is that the world is just more global in general with regard to trade, but just because our capabilities of trading globally are just much, much greater than they were back then. We can fly things, we can ship things much, much easier. Right. And we can communicate instantaneously. But the other big thing that's changed is, unlike in 1791, America happens to be the world trade dominator for the most part, at least most industries, not all of them, but so
we consume the most. We definitely are the biggest consumer.
Right. So, but does okay? So, two questions. One, does a global system kind of just inherently favor us because we're the biggest consumers and because we manage shipping and because we have the reserve currency and things like that? And two, is there? I mean, I guess let's start with that one. My next question is basically like, can we decouple it?
It did, and that's why we look at our golden age. It did in the post-war era, post World War II era, the 1950s, 1960s, right? Our industries, right? People came to us, but we invested a lot of money, globalists and things, in the factories and in the industry in Germany, right? In Japan, in other European areas, and built up their industry and then tore down our barriers. And so now they were able to, and then we recognized Red China. This is right. And they were able to bring their goods here, were to the detriment of our factories, right? We see the malaise in the 70s, factories started closing, wages started being hurt, right? And then NAFTA, which was signed by Bill Clinton, the North American Free Trade Agreement, was a big thing that a lot of factory jobs, middle America, or Main Street jobs, left the country, right? And small towns, right? Big cities that have really diverse economies, especially or intellectual or innovative, a lot of entrepreneurial or tech-based or heavy industry survived. But other places really suffered, and even places that were titans of industry like Pittsburgh went into serious major decline, right? When the steel industry and other things like that. And so this has been a big thing that Trump has said. While we're consuming goods other people are making, right, our factories are falling behind in technology from other factories. That made in America doesn't mean the best anymore, right? It became a sort of a byword for maybe second rate. The best made things were going to be made by the Japanese or by the Germans, right? Or in Israel or something like that. So, and that degradation was because there weren't reasonable barriers and we weren't subsidizing our own industry other than Boeing. Like Boeing aircraft,
military,
was military, right? We're very well connected politically to get funding, right, to maintain that.
So one interesting thing that I've stumbled across, and one advantage that America has, and I'm wondering if we keep it, right? Because I see the wisdom in making sure that we have our own industry, right? Obviously, right? This seems like a no-brainer, and losing it seems like ridiculous in hindsight, right? But I guess it's not so simple, I'm sure, when you're in the moment. But one advantage that we had as Americans in production is that our time is like basically pound for pound more valuable than other people's time in other nations, because if you're outsourcing like the unskilled labor to the cheapest markets, that means that what remain are like the educated jobs constructing the final components, which is much more valuable to, monetarily to go from like the component pieces to the finished model than it is to go from the natural resource to the component pieces.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Those are the arguments people made for a long time. Okay, so you make mattresses, and your mattress factory in a small town in North Carolina shuts down because people can buy cheaper, better mattresses from Japan or China, right? And they said, well, these mattress people that manufacture mattresses, they're smart people, right? They can learn other trades, right? They can learn to make vacuums or roofing material, whatever, right? And so so they try, would transfer into the different things, but ultimately, even those sort of transfer manufacturing or other trades were going overseas, and then it was just like code, high tech. Learn to code, learn the computers, right? And so it became we became, and so information services and high tech I worked in that for a long time. Myself, it's not a bad thing. And I worked in finance. Part of my knowledge is I worked in mortgage finance for a long time. I worked for Lehman Brothers when they went out of business.
Whoops.
I worked. I worked for the Royal Bank of Canada for a little while, as well, and a subprime Wall Street mortgage company called New Century Mortgage. Right, all went out of business in 2008. Right, and got out of Dodge. So I see how. At first, I thought that being part of mortgages, I was like helping people get their homes. I was helping Main Street, but saw that at a higher level, what people were doing was taking that, then they were reselling those loans in a way that made them very risky, and so destabilized it. Now, normally, right? Yeah, if a bank makes bad bets, makes bad loans, and the people fail on them, and they fail, they go out of business. That's it. And maybe the people who own the homes get their mortgages paid off because the banks failed or whatever. But no, right, there was a huge bailout, and this is a globalist philosophy. We still have a lot of debt from this. The banks paid back their portion, but there was still a lot of debt because they assumed, like Lehman Brothers had went out of business, but they had like $1 trillion in bad loans that and Bear Stearns and stuff that they took on. So
this is why I'm not Keynesian, right? So like
and so really that's bad policy that the U.S. should, they essentially prioritize Wall Street over Main Street. Now, part of the argument, people will argue, like, people have pensions or 401ks or retirement accounts on Wall Street, and so that is helping people by stabilizing Wall Street, that they have a retirement and things like that. That not as many. It's not just elites that have interest in Wall Street being not falling apart, but you can take that too far, and essentially. Trump has felt like monetary policy at the Fed has been more emphasized on Wall Street over Main Street, over everyday concerns, which is American growth, job growth, solid wage increases, right, and things for blue collar, but as with just right, the ways you make money in an economy. This is old school economics, right? You dig it out of the ground through mining, right? That's one thing you want: rare earth mining. You
Mm-hmm.
grow it through agriculture.
Yep.
You manufacture it, right? And then there's the idea of trade, type of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And
Services.
but having sort of a strong basis with all of those legs of the table, when you get rid of manufacturing, or not get rid of, but
Right.
it becomes a weak leg or something like that. And then you're just consuming more. It ended up, right. We got to have 30 years of seeing what NAFTA did, and the results were not what politicians said they were going to be at the time. All the
Right.
positives they said. Well, for elites, yeah, they could buy goods cheaper now, but working families and towns, economies, local economies were decimated or sometimes devastated by these things.
Right.
And the adjustments were made, have weakened us to a point where our national security, right? We're faced with, right? We can't produce all these things that we need because we've offshored it or outsourced it to other countries.
Right.
And so that it means that we're vulnerable and we can be controlled. That we're tied into this global thing that we lose a degree of our American independence.
Yeah.
So again,
So what about?
and I think it's fun for in part of our 250-year anniversary of our independence that Trump wants to bring us back to economic independence from the globalist British Empire world order.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I mean, like, obviously, doing what Trump is doing now is what got us into the position of power, right? It's like what put us
Yeah.
on the map
Yeah.
as the global, but it may not be what keeps us there, and I don't know, and it's obviously it's impossible to know, right? Like you just don't know if it's going to keep you on top until if either it does or it doesn't. One
Well, our
concern,
technological advantage, if we could hoard our technology and keep it private, but we give it away. Like China comes over, they read all our patents, they steal all of our technology. So even our innovation doesn't give us the
edge,
um,
yeah,
the edge that we used to have, right? And one of the main fears of elites is that China will steal the technology um, from from the Netherlands, right?
right.
That owns the to make
ASML,
the
yeah.
highest end chips, kind of thing like that, because they are,
Or they'll develop it
spying.
themselves.
They're spying. They're not looking for missile designs
Right.
or weapons.
Yeah.
They're looking for technology because so that they can leapfrog without having to spend all that money on R&D, right? The capitalist countries have to spend to just skip and get the best tech and just start
Well,
reaping the profits and benefits.
they'd still have to buy quartz from North Carolina with that video you
Yes,
showed me
that's
there. Yeah,
true. They
which
would
is
still
good.
have to buy quartz.
But now, one question though I have though is so let's say we do kind of take a step back from the global stage, right? And we decouple a little bit. What kind of effect does that have on our reserve currency, right? What does that place us in a situation where they just don't need
Well,
us as
yeah.
much?
Well, yeah. In 2019, Mark Carney, though, who at the time was just an official in the Canadian government, but is now the prime minister, said that they advocated to create some new global currency to get away from the dollar that was managed by global elites. This has been an idea, right, as far back as 2019, that yes, there are elites that want to control monetary policy, and they want to use climate science as a way to gain control and to take money from wealthy countries, and then to give it to poor countries, and then those poor countries become reliant on them. That allows them to maintain control.
Right.
Right. And there's a kind of thing like the more people in America are poor or constantly overtaxed or strapped for cash, that they're easier to control. If we become prosperous, then we gain, right. Financial independence is true independence. That's the American dream right now, is
Right.
financial independence. That you're not relying on anything. You can be You can have your opinions of the government. You can express them, be skeptical or supportive. You can take controversial positions because you're not worried about upsetting your overlords that provide you everything. So widespread wealth is considered bad for central control, like the communists' playbook is to sort of have poverty so that you can have more control by central global elites.
Interesting. Independence mentioned something I kind of want to look into a little bit. He says the American First, I assuming initiative is killing the hegemony. He thinks that the withdrawal from the WHO and the seemingly planned breakup of NATO is an indicator that we're going to be hurting for the future currency issues. I'm not so sure that's true. I also don't know, if those institutions are fundamentally good for America, right? Like they may have been at one point in time. One thing that, it's almost funny. I almost want to quote Palmerston here by saying, these allies need not be permanent, right? Like they were good for us for a short amount of time, but I'm wondering if that doesn't mean that they're always going to serve a positive purpose for America, because we change, they change. Obviously, like we don't need them for defense or anything. Like the Warsaw Pact is gone, right? We don't need, and it seems like WHO is constantly pressing boundaries as far as like trying to overshoot constitutionally, trying to like get access to rights, that fundamental rights of citizens that like I'm not willing to give up, that our Constitution protects me, from that kind of aggression. Now, that being said, I agree that the more we withdraw, the less influence we have. So we probably have to replace those institutions maybe with something else, or another initiative of our own or something like that. But I just worry that people think that the moment, we run into an institution we don't like anymore, they're like, oh, we're withdrawing and we're never going to be able to hold on to control. I don't think our control hinges off individual institutions like that.
Well, yeah, and maybe the need for control was important in the post-war 20th century, right? But it's time to reevaluate that. Essentially, Europe very much likes us being, their tough guy, their enforcer, right? They can do what they want, but if we're going to rein in and govern, we need to reevaluate that. Is that always going to be in our interest, or is it,
Yeah, good question.
So, but economic freedom, I think part of the reason why cryptocurrency has been so big is it's outside of this British Empire central banking thing. And remember, these bankers tried to debank Donald Trump, tried to use the banking system against him. So he's very skeptical of this world banking order, right? and they did everything they could to trash him, the 90 felonies charges and stuff, to keep him from coming back. But the United States, right, to their credit, the people here knew that we needed to reset. We needed a counter-revolution against the Biden, which was really the third Obama administration of that far leftism. Right, we're not a communist country. Right, we don't want central planning. We're very skeptical that the government does things better than what private sector can do it. And we need to move back to that. We need to reestablish our individual freedom, but have a social structure where our nation has its sovereignty. And immigration's a huge part of that. Importing people here was something, and with no pressure to assimilate, was a way of just degrading or destroying American culture, that we lose our monoculture, that bring people here who aren't loyal to the country anymore, right? There was, it's a popular podcast, whatever, had a bunch of college-age young women on there and asked, who were of dual citizenship, but had lived their whole life in America, and said, like, all right, if the United States got in a conflict with this country, who would you support, the U.S. or the other country, right? Oh, automatically they'd support the other country.
Of course.
Not the U.S. And it's like,
well, that's on them.
You didn't spend any time there. Like all your time here, the U.S. is giving you everything and you have no loyalty to them. This is part of the the long institutional breakdown, right, of our education system that has gotten stupider and stupider, right? We used to revere teachers. Now we think, of teachers as indoctrinating and weakening our children, making our children, less able to do things. And this weakening of the culture, they think if they can bring that down, and we have no industry where we have to buy goods from the world, that they can kind of harness the ride the bull, make us do their bidding, right? So, and then right now they're sort of like, you're being a bully, or you're being how Trump got what he wanted in Greenland, right? He got we're not taking over Greenland, but everything he wanted as far as bases, rare earth extraction, were all given to him, even though the Danes, who were part of the British world order, didn't want to give it to him at first. When he pushed, right, finally they capitulated. And they don't like his tactics, but it's, by not being under their thumb, he can do that. He wants to keep America having that independence. Well, the globalists do not. So this is a sort of existential sort of globalist or sovereignty.
So Trump, let's talk about Trump for a minute, because, obviously he's never been, I've never been his favorite number one fan. But so one thing that worries me, right, is that because he has history with the banking system, that some of this is just reactionary, right? Because we know that Trump is not above the little, getting back at people, right? And the other thing that worries me is that Trump is going to use the system for like short-term optics gain, right? Like I'm worried that he's going to, get a partner in the treasury, in the Fed, who's going to, basically be a yes man, who's going to do his bidding, and then he's going to be able to influence that person to, lower rates whenever he wants, so that, the economy is stimulated, everything looks good, wage growth goes up, GDP goes up, everything, the markets soar, and then Trump looks great, even if it's at the expense of potential future gains.
Sure.
So what do you think about that prospect?
Well, monetary policy is inherently political. And so the president is obviously going to want things things to go well, while he would suffer the political consequences if they don't. But Bissett I don't know if you've heard Secretary of Treasury Bissett speak. He's not an intellectual lightweight.
No, yeah, he's smart.
And Warsh is not either. These people have deep understanding of economics to a level far deeper than Trump's, and he understands that. But so he's sort of setting the general thing, and they're sort of applying how it's going to go. But there is an intellectual basis beyond his sort of glib, pontification, right? When Trump speaks sometimes off the cuff, right, without prepared notes, he can come across as unthoughtful, right? But there are deep intellectual people in his administration that have sound reasons for why they should do this. And they go, right, when they talked about Davos, Greer was the undersecretary who gave the talk that brought up Alexander Hamilton. They have deep roots in American history. They go back to Hamilton. And various presidents have reawakened, been dedicated them to various different levels. One of the things I learned about the president that was most dedicated to them after Hamilton was Abraham Lincoln, and was making it a big part of the Republican Party. And but when he was assassinated and Johnson took over, who was a Southerner and very different from him, and was very much friendly to the British world order, right? And so we lost some steam on that. McKinley, Trump has talked about how McKinley, when McKinley put tariffs in, that our industry took off. McKinley also was trying to use tariffs to promote American industry, and have independence from the British Empire sort of system of just sending raw goods and have them out, and he was assassinated. And then President Kennedy was the last person to issue United States banknotes and have a plan in place for the U.S. Treasury to issue money and to phase out the Fed, and he was assassinated. They the
wish that had happened.
group Promethean Action, they're on YouTube. Promethean Action, they're on X. They have an ebook to talk about how they draw lines, how the British were part of these assassinations.
Mm-hmm.
They think that there was more to them. Now,
conspiracy theory.
I'll have to read that ebook. I'm not familiar with it, but I know that John Wilkes Booth was killed before he could ever be interrogated. Right? They found him hiding in a barn, and so to see, and so his true motivations are guessed at, and seen as mainly just he was a pro-slavery person. Right. Kennedy's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, was killed before he could fully express all of his things. He was just taken as a commie stooge who hated American freedom. But Johnson, right, again, who succeeded Kennedy, immediately stopped those United States banknotes and went back to the world order. And Nixon was a Republican, but governed as the most progressive president since really Woodrow Wilson, right? And recognized Red China, did all these things, wanted to create national health care. So when we have people talking about this monoparty, people have maybe complained that there's not a big difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. This was a big thing that both sides for a long time were part of this globalist order. Right? Yeah. And something we had to be in that post-war to stand up against the Russians, right? Stand up against the Warsaw Pact. But there have been presidents that have tried to assert American exceptionalism and through tariffs and subsidies and build up our industry. And Trump sees now that we don't need to really withstand Russia. The lesson he's taken from Ukraine is that the Russian army does not need to be feared. Right? As long as you have a competent military, you can stand up to them, kind of thing. Then we don't need to kowtow or make all these sacrifices that we had before. We're destroying our Main Street, hollowing out our economy to do this, and we don't need to, and we can engage China through strength and not be overly hawkish on Taiwan or things like that, or have red lines like the globalists would like. So it's a different world order. I'm not saying it's perfect right now. I haven't read through Hegseth's complete defense doctrine that was released on the 23rd. But I think I'm at a point at this point where I think the president should be given the benefit of the doubt, and that our economy is doing well, and that we do need to, just because it's ruffling feathers of people that don't want to spend money to build up their militaries, or don't want to have to, would love to make huge windfall profits selling the U.S. and not make slightly less by paying tariffs to the U.S. or things like that.
Enjoy all the discounts of medical supplies, and we have to front the differences and stuff like that.
Well, we do all the innovation, and they reap all the profits. That was fun. This is the type of thing we can have these things, but when people start exploiting them, then we have to reevaluate them. Just like daycares in Minnesota, we give out that money, but when we find out that you're gaming the system and exploiting it, and defrauding American taxpayers, something has to change. And we've got to pull the plug. The free money from USAID or other NGOs, I think that's a big part of it. And this is the deep state. The deep state will fight. And I think the bigger thing that Promethean Action has taught me is the deep state is really tied to this globalist British world order.
Yeah. Okay. So, hypothetically, I just want to pitch this theory, right? Let's say one day, many years from now, America runs the entire Earth. Right. Right. Kind of a silly hypothetical, but it's worth investigating for the purposes of this one example, right? So let's say we have everything. Wouldn't things effectively run as they do in the globalist world order just under us? And if so, why are we fighting it so hard? Why don't we try to move toward that?
Well, if people want to join us, they can, but they
Right.
don't.
I'm been waiting.
They don't, right? When we're at that, so
this may be a different avenue.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like we're so wealthy, we can take wealth from your working people and give it to, other people that are poor, right? It's basically wealth redistribution, which is a big part of the left, rather than trusting us. You don't know how to control your own wealth. It's a very elitist type of thing. We know how best a small group of people will take all this wealth and we'll put it where it really does the best.
Yeah.
And don't see the effects, right? The effect of giving these free handouts or free donations to Africa has stymied their economies sometimes, or not allowed them to build up the Chinese system of road building and indebtedness to Africa is not something that is built up and created wealth there, right?
Right.
And so we invite people. Hey, if you want to become part of the United States, Trump offered a plan for Canada to become the United States. What do they say? No. Everybody wants to have their own soccer team and their own Miss USA, or Miss Universe contestant. So they're reluctant to join us, and they have their own interests, right? They wanna bring prosperity to their economies and wealth to their people.
So yeah, Ryan, I want to address something. So Brian here says, based on fiscal year 2024 data, every $1 of USAID funding generates approximately $2 to $4 in measurable economic and strategic returns to the United States. So first of all, I would be extremely skeptical of fiscal charts presented by an organization that has a vested interest in making themselves look good. Secondly, I'm also skeptical of anything that claims a quote unquote economic multiplication version of itself. Like it's funny when you get into these again, I'm not an economist, but when you get into these feedback loops where you're like, we're going to take this person's dollar and we're going to give it to this person, and that person's going to spend it back with the first person, and that's an economic multiplier. And I'm like, well, did you really actually do anything, or did you just move money around 5 times and say, oh, it was a 5x multiplier? No, so a lot of these are actually just like financial games to make somebody look good or to make it seem like money is moving. And don't get me wrong, if you're the government and you're reaping the rewards for it, it might actually be good for you because each time the money moves, you take a little chunk out, right? Like you're raking the pot. But yeah, one of these games, and here you're talking about, one of the things you're talking about is not even economic returns. You're talking about strategic returns. How do you measure a soft result like that? Yeah. That's just a guess. That's all subjective. So
USAID, they're basically saying, oh, fraud is still good for us. USAID money can still go out as long as it's approved by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, as long as it works in our interests, right? And he's making sure it doesn't go out fraudulently or doesn't go out to things that are against our interests. I mean, it's sort of common sense. Yeah, but they're saying, well, even if it's fraud, even if it's just going that people are saying, oh, we're taking this money to give out medicine to hungry children in Africa, and they're using it just to build, beautiful homes for themselves and drive fancy cars. They're like, well, they're employing people to build their fancy homes.
Yeah, they're giving it to their warlord.
Right. And they're ordering tile from a tile company in Ohio, so that's good for us for their mansions.
Something else to mention too is a lot of the game here, right? Is like people say, well, it generates this amount of like economic and strategic returns, but people forget about the opportunity loss cost, right? Isn't that money capable of generating greater economic and strategic returns in other areas? Plus, by the way, USAID in particular, proven to have a lot of dead like money movement, proven. Like the networks are like definitely outlined. You can go look them up right now. I've seen it myself. But not only that, the ones that were particularly effective in developing other countries and like helping out and actually like aid-based programs that weren't just like about helping out trans operas and stuff like that. Those were all folded under the State Department, so they still exist. It's just not U.S. aid, right? It's just not USIP anymore.
I would like whoever is trying to defend USAID to defend Stacey Abrams NGO that got $2 billion. Okay, did that benefit anybody? Right? No, that's pouring, and we just poured a lot of money into a hole, right? So corruption should not be standard for by or accepted by anybody, any American citizen, anyone, and it should be the first job of any serious administration to root out corruption so that what they're spending is allocated correctly and going to the purpose, achieving a purpose that where they're not hindering their own purpose. They're not
both sides should be doing this. Like, this is not a partisan thing, right? What drives me crazy is, and the right does it too. That like whoever's doing the fraud or the corruption is like all of a sudden they're against rooting it out. And like, well, of course, right? Because you don't want to get discovered. But both sides do it all the time, and both sides should be on board with just getting rid of the corruption. It should be
they do it in different ways, but I don't think the Republicans are trying to set up fraudulent with health organizations and daycares and then donate to Republican candidates.
With respect, and this is not even a good or a bad thing. Republicans just aren't as good at it. Right. That's the reason that the Democrats are more successful, is they're usually a little bit like Soros wrote the book on this stuff. He's just a master at setting up these shell companies and NGOs and and moving money around so that it's like an economic multiplier, right? And it's producing all these returns, and he's getting government subsidies from and this and that and the other thing. I mean, he was a master, and I give him props for it. But there are very few people that have the financial skill to move money like that on the the right donor list, right? Even though they're all very wealthy and very capable in their own investment fields. But now the other side of that is like usually on the right, when there's corruption, it's just like, oh yeah, this guy just embezzled $300,000 and that's it. It's just nothing special to it. It's just like he just flat out stole the money and and goes to jail. It's like, well, all right, but on the left, it's very intricate and web-like. Good for them, but we should be stamping out both sides of that equation. It should be.
Yeah, and I know we've entered a government shutdown because by the Democrats, they're trying to frame it. The narrative they're trying to frame it is over that it's over immigration policy. Right? Now we can talk about that nullification. They want federal law. The Trump campaigned on and was elected on enforcing federal law when it came to immigration. They want that to not apply in their states, just like the Confederate states didn't want the laws against slavery to apply in their states, right? Nullification,
right?
And so we went to that's not going to stand. And the Supreme Court gave Trump a win this week. He can use the Insurrection Act, the enemy act. He can send people straight to Salvadoran prison. So with that ruling, I mean, self-deport is the answer. If you don't want to end up in El Salvador, self-deport and then start the process to legally come back here. You can apply to legally re-enter the United States once you've self-deported. They'll even pay you $1,000 to do it, right? But a lot of the resistance is also going to be towards this economic policy. It's not just about and breaking from the globalists. It's not just about Minnesota and the enforcement of immigration law in Minnesota.
Of course not. Yeah, which is why, right, the problems are basically limited to Minnesota. But of course, yeah, and this is what drives me crazy. This is the one thing that is constitutional, like one of the few powers constitutionally delegated to the federal government, and then this is the one thing that they want states' rights on. That's funny. That's just funny to me. And
because we can have our governor say, "Well, my citizens don't have to pay income tax."
Yeah, right.
Right. And not let IRS agents come here to
I don't
enforce that.
like that.
Right. Well,
So
no, Florida doesn't. Florida doesn't have state income tax.
state income tax,
But
right?
they got to nullify federal income tax. I think putting the house in order, and really, we're still counter-revolutionizing things that Obama and Biden did. Trump had 4 years to plan to really understand what needed to change, and I think this is understanding he's getting at the root of the deep state. That this deep state are these globalists who want to destroy American sovereignty, destroy American culture, and make us just tools of global elites that will determine economic policy for the world and decide how much prosperity we have or don't have,
Now,
right?
let me
Rather
just ask
than
though,
us dictating our own.
is there a way to turn it around and use this global system to our advantage? Is there a way to become the global center? Is this even, I don't even know if that's something we'd want, but is there a way that we use that, flip it, and then instead of like the British banks being the world banks, America banks are the world banks, we run the show, we run the house, and then everybody's got to come to us begging instead of the other way around?
I guess that's true. Like I think I talked to you about how for forever the London Interbank offered rate, or LIBOR, was the determining factor of what interest rates were for on daily. It was actually 2023, quite recently, that was finally shut down, right? Because it was seen it could be too easily manipulated for political ends or for things like that. And there's a the United States has sort of created something that's closer to a true market, true capitalist kind of. It's based on real transactions, and nobody's ostensibly what they say is nobody's putting their thumb on the scale. Now it would be a controversy to find out that isn't the case, but that's the goal at least. So I think just creating honest systems whether the U.S. dominates it or controls it would just be, we're ensuring that it's honest and transparent,
Or at
right?
least more so than most.
And that's the big thing, like, and you have trust that the assets are there, and that there's not going to be corruption. It's why people like to bank in Switzerland, because they have a reputation for honesty, that they're not going to steal, or just nationalize. Oh, this is all our money now. All right. And so whoever is most trusted, that they're not going to default on their loans, that they're going to be honest and transparent, are going to have that. So that's just, people are going to want to do business. What I've always said, if we're honest in our dealings with our fellow men, there's no end to our prosperity. Right?
Yeah.
If I sell you something and it's everything that I told you it was when you get it, and you pay me what you told me you would pay me for that, right? Because we were both honest with each other. I was honest with whatever limitations it were, and you were honest and didn't try to swindle me and not pay me or try to pay me less. If we both have that level of trust, there's no end to the prosperity of trade. It's when we're worried that we're going to get scammed, that we're buying something and it's not what we're being told. And then we say, well, then I'm just not going to pay you what or we send something to somebody. We're like, we hope this guy pays me, right? I have no means to enforce getting it back. I'm selling this I sold a magic card to somebody in Italy, and that guy just decided not to pay me for it. So, what could I do? And what I did was I stopped selling magic cards to Italy.
Yeah.
But if he was honest, right, then that prosperity could have still happened. So that's a big thing. If the U.S. can just, based on honesty and not manipulation, not corruption, we can I think be leaders. But right now, there's a lot of corruption in America when it comes to money, and so people are skeptical.
Yeah. So all right, I got one more question for you. So again, I'm not Keynesian in my economic style, but how I originally understood Keynesian economics is that it's supposed to, in the natural boom bust cycles, right? It's supposed to like round off the spikes, right? To like keep the peaks from happening and the valleys from being as low as possible, the peaks from being as high as possible. But the way that Powell seems to run the Treasury isn't like that. It's more like a constant vice grip where he's constantly reinforcing every single second of every single day. That doesn't seem like Keynesian to me. Am I wrong in my intuition? It seems like instead of just cutting off the spikes, he's like every day adjusting to like make sure that it's like a constant line. And I don't think that's even possible.
Yeah, there should be some natural fluctuations, but I would say the true Keynesian economics isn't just monetary policy, right? It also has to do with spending and taxes.
Okay, right.
That we're only supposed to run deficits when the economy is bad.
Right.
When the economy is doing well, 5%, what we need to really do is balance that budget and get rid of those deficits. Right.
That's crazy talk.
And or if anything, run it where we pay back the things during the good times. Now, what that will do, right? Because it means the government is not spending as much money out there. So we're taking in money and now we're paying off our debts, like or we're just spending what we take in and not priming the pump.
Right.
That's the thing that nobody
nobody wants to give up on it.
Since the attack on the Twin Towers has been willing to do. That will be a test of true conservative economic principles if once Trump gets what he wants as far as economic, right? He feels like to rebuild our industry, it's important that he has to do these subsidies. So he can't.
Right.
He has to deficit spend it now. But once they're up and going and those things are strong, we don't have to subsidize them anymore.
He's not going to stop. He's not going to
stop. Well, he's got figures. Whereas whether Rubio or Vance or whoever succeeds, as the president, where they will come down on that.
They're not going to either, because the problem is it's too optics focused now, right? Like getting in office and staying in office. It has very little to do with what you actually accomplish. That's more to do with what you look like in the moment or what you promise, right? So everybody's going to promise free stuff to the American people, and the only way you can promise free stuff is if you're, just spending more than you make. That's just by definition. So it's a shame that it's like that, but I'm hoping that anyway. Guys, that's all we really have for you today. And Christian, thank you for letting me tap your knowledge. And guys, I hope you realize that's kind of like how I start to take in knowledge. It's not the finish line. It's just the very, very start of the game. I ask questions, figure out what I want to learn and research more, and then fact check, and then research, and then fact check, and then research. I encourage all of you to do the same. I don't think you should take anybody's word for anything, especially not us lowly, humble here. But
or the mainstream media.
Definitely not them. Yeah, we're going to always try to do you right if we can. So thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next time on Common Mansplaining.
Keep it coming.
Keep it coming.